Hello everyone, this is Mike History 2, and today we are looking at part 5 of What If the Axis Were Moral, an alternate scenario that I am doing with Julius Caesar, and if you haven't subscribed to his channel and checked out the playlist, you definitely should. So, to understand what's going on, obviously you need to watch the first 4 videos, so please go watch those. But what's going to make this video different is that this is not really an alternate history in the sense of a timeline, but this video and the last and final video will instead look at some overall changes that do not have specific dates linked to them. And so more, changes in culture, changes in politics. And so I think, at least for me, I find this a little more interesting. Maybe you like the timeline more, but anyways, both of them are important. Sorry for wasting so much time. Let's get straight to it. So let's look at some general outlook changes. The first one is geopolitical. Because you see, just as much is changed by what didn't happen as by what did. Now, first of all, something which you might not think of at first, but a huge effect of this different World War II is that conquest is still considered acceptable and normal due to it not having been given a bad reputation because of Germany and Japan's excessive violence. Decolonization, therefore, begins much later, as the European powers feel no need to decolonize and don't believe that colonialism was a bad thing. Nevertheless, eventually, due to democratization and the demographic rise in the colonized nations, decolonization eventually happens, but really only mainly occurs in the 1990s, so a lot more recently. This has a profound effect not only in the colonized areas, but also in Europe itself. Europeans are proud of their conquests and still believe their civilization to be superior. Racism is more common in this world, although this widely depends on which European country is involved. The United Nations and later the European Union and many other international organizations are never created, as the world remains much more divided and local, and with no one superpower dominating the world. The trauma of World War II is much lessened, and thus the counterculture never emerges. Because of this, things like rock, metal, and other forms of similar music are stopped by the various European nations, even if they are sometimes enjoyed in the United States. There isn't really a hippie or anti-war movement, and the civil rights movement is much more violent. Clothing also remains much more formal, and jeans and casual clothing are not seen as acceptable in society. Nations we generally associate with technological progress and world power status are somewhat different as well. Germany, Japan, and Canada are the world's most technologically advanced nations due to the first two not being devastated by the war, and Canada not being too damaged by the American and British War. For example, Japan was the creator of the Seikan Tsunugari, or what we in English would call the Internet. Russia, meanwhile, is still weaker due to having lost another world war and doesn't have as much money to invest in technology. Left-wing ideology is much weaker in this world as the failure of communism discredits it as an ideology, and it is seen as more of a threat, not just in the United States but worldwide, although its popularity decreases over time, having failed in both China and Russia. Instead, socialism and anarchism remain more popular, but generally are more democratic and less radical. Nazism isn't seen as anything bad, but rather as just a form of right-wing ideology, although later Nazi leadership becomes far less radical, and so the definition of Nazi changes over time. Hitler has a mixed legacy. On the one hand, he is seen as a great German conqueror and anti-communist warrior, but also seen as too fanatic and crazy. But by the way, if you want to learn more about what Hitler actually did, you should go check out the 2 videos I made on Hitler's biography. Anyways, he is viewed the same way Stalin is seen today, and yes, another shameless plug. I made a bunch of videos about Stalin, so go watch those as well. Mostly negative, but with some people really being fans of him. The so-called taboo ideology in this world is communism, and being a communist results in you being ejected from society and culture in general, just like being a Nazi today. Now, without the counterculture movement, family remains much more traditional and divorce remains rare. Women mostly do not work and are expected to stay at home. Most families are larger, but family size still decreases over time. Now, related to this is religion. Christianity remains much stronger in the West, but neo-paganism is more common in Germany. Most societies are religious, although certain areas like the Netherlands are mostly irreligious. Atheism still increases, but not as much, and is still seen as highly taboo in many societies to even think about being atheist. Church attendance is much higher, and the church still plays a very important role in society. Also, anti-Semitism is much more common since the Holocaust never happened, and so anti-Semitism isn't seen as negatively. The world is a poorer place since the United States never becomes a dominant power and spreads capitalism around the world. Although Europe becomes rich and developed as well as Japan, many parts of the world are even poorer than they are in our timeline, especially as colonization ends much later. Ironically, though, even Western countries aren't as rich, as America had a longer depression and Western Europe never gets the Marshall Plan. However, Eastern Europe is in a much better place without all those decades of communism. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you found this to be an interesting video about some possible effects of an alternate World War II. Don't forget to check out the final video on Julius Caesar's channel, and I'll see you next time. Bye.